Hi, welcome to my channel. Dalai Lama said, love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. It's true, one must not lose faith in humanity. Today, you're going to hear the ballad, A Legend of the Northland, written by Pope Carey, which gives a message to the humankind about humanity. Pope Carey was born on 4th September 1824 and died on 31st July 1871. She was an American poetess. A Legend of the Northland, written by Pope Carey, is a ballad with a prized reminder to the humanity. A ballad is a song narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. In this poem, A Legend of Northland, the poetess tells a ballad about a stingy lady and Saint Peter, who was hungry because of his journey worldwide. There are 16 stanzas in the poem, and these stanzas tell us a story with a moral. The title, A Legend of Northland, plainly conveys us that this poem is a historical story of the northernmost part of terrain. A story which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. Now, it's time for you to listen the poem. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe it's true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it preaching, just as he did, you know. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth, and being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore she needed another, and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first one had done. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough, and rolled it flat, and baked it thin as a wafer. But she couldn't part with that, for she said, my cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself, are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food, by boring and boring and boring, all day in the hard dry wood. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed into a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burned, black as a coal in the flame, and every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood, where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Now let's try to understand the poem stanza-wise. The poetess begins the poem by describing a place which is in the northern region, a place where its climate is characterized by cold winters and the days during winter where the sun never rises. The poetess says that since the nights are overlong, the folks dwelling in the northern region find exceptionally difficult to sleep for such long hours. The poetess gives the reader an imagery of the Northland's cold winters in the second stanza by telling us that the land is covered with snow and the people of Northland use reindeer for their transportation. It is generally known that in places with snow on the ground for long periods of time, reindeer are used to pull the sleigh. To get the warmth in such cold climate, the children are dressed in woolly clothes, and this sight is amusing as they look like bears' cubs. In the third stanza, the poetess states that to these joyful children, an interesting story is told by their parents and elders. But the poetess didn't believe the story. Though she didn't believe the story, she felt that if this story was voiced in her poem, the reader might pick up a lesson, as the story provides the reader an excellent message. Hence, the poetess narrates the story in the form of a ballad. The poetess starts narrating the story of a virtuous saint in the fourth stanza. The tale speaks of Saint Peter, who travelled far and wide to lecture his narrative of religion. The story starts like this. Saint Peter, after traveling worldwide to lecture his narrative of religion, came to the entrance of a small house. He saw a woman in the cottage making cakes and baking them on the fireplace. Saint Peter, after traveling the whole day, feels worn out and weak. He hadn't eaten since morning, so when he saw the woman baking the cakes, he requested her to offer him a piece of cake from her stock of cakes she had baked. The baker couldn't deny the request. At the same time, she didn't want to give the cake which she had in her store. Being stingy, the woman made a tiny cake and baked it. After the cake was done, she looked at it and thought for herself that the cake was too big to offer to a stranger. Her meanness led her to make a cake of smaller in size. Each time she baked a cake, it seemed to her as big as the one she had baked earlier. The woman was penny pinching. She didn't have the generous heart to give a small piece of cake to Saint Peter. This time, the woman decided to make the smallest cake, so she took a small ball of dough and rolled it flat. Then she baked it. When she baked the cake, it was as thin as a wafer. The woman was so cruel that she did not have the mood to give the cheese biscuit to the saint. The woman expressed to the saint that the cakes that she made looked as if they were too small when she ate them, but the same cakes seemed too big when she wanted to offer him. Saying so, the miserly woman put all the cakes she made on the shelf. On seeing the tight-fistedness of the woman, the saint, who was weak and starving, was irritated. It's quite natural that any woman of such an approach was certain to aggravate a noble saint. The saint told the woman that she was too self-centered to live as a human with all comforts, such as food, a house to live in, and fire to keep her warm in the cold region. The provoked saint cursed the cruel woman that henceforth she would live the life of the birds. He cursed the woman that she should get her small amount of food through tiresome work, as the birds do, working all day long in the tough dry wood. No sooner the saint cursed the woman, without having a chance to voice, she fluttered out through the chimney in the form of a bird. The saint's curse transformed the woman into a woodpecker. The woman was wearing a red cap on her head. When she flew out as a bird through the chimney, only the red color on her head was left. The rest of her clothes were blackened in the fire. The fable tells that it is because of the red scarf on the woman's head woodpeckers have red hooves. Finally, the poetess ends her ballad saying that every child in the Northland sees this woman who had transformed into a woodpecker, pecking the wood monotonously in the forest for food. The ballad serves as a reminder to the people of Northland about the cruel woman's greed and the saint's curse, which transformed her as a woodpecker. The message that is passed on through the story from one age group to another is about the woman's greed that made her to lose her comforts and made her to lead a life full of tirelessness. The story serves as an illustration that as humans we need to be compassionate and serve the needy. Now it's time for us to see the literary devices that are used in the poem. First we'll be discussing the rhyme scheme. Rhyme, as you know, is the flow of words within each meter and stanza to produce a rhythmic effect. Later we'll be discussing the alliterations used in the poem. Alliteration is nothing but the repetition of the same consonant sound in the beginning of each word. Then we have repetition here in this poem. Repetition often uses word associations to express ideas and emotions in an indirect manner, putting emphasis on a point, confirming an idea, or describing a notion. Then we'll be discussing about the simile used in the poem. Simile is a figure of speech comparing two unlike things that is often introduced by like or as. Finally, we have enjambment in the poem. Enjambment is a lack of punctuation. It creates run-on lines where a thought, phrase, or clause in a line of poetry does not come to an end break but moves on to the following line. Now let's discuss the literary devices that are used in the poem. In the first line, the word away is repeated. So this is repetition. Now we'll see the alliterations that are used. All the words that are in red color are the alliterations, because alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds. Here the is repeated. Again here also the is repeated. Here the sound l is repeated. Here the sound f is repeated. Here the sound the is repeated. Here y. Here l sound is repeated. Here th sound is repeated. Now let's see this line. And the children look like bear's cub. Here the children are compared to the bear's cubs using the word like. So this is the simile. Now we'll be talking about the enjambment. Enjambment is a lack of punctuation where the line runs on to the next line. You can see the third line is not punctuated. So the third line and the fourth line are enjambment. Similarly, here you can see this first line and the second line, they are enjambment. Here third line and the fourth line are enjambment, not punctuated. In the same way, here this line and this line, it's not punctuated, so these are enjambment. Again here you can see it's not punctuated, so this is enjambment. Throughout the poem, I want you to find out the enjambment in the same manner. Now let's see the literary devices that are used in the next 4 stanzas. In the first line, you can see the word came cottage. K sound is repeated. Here where woman was, W sound is repeated. So these are alliterations. In the same way, faint, fasting, F sound is repeated. Here day, done, D sound is repeated. Here still, smaller, so S sound is repeated. So all these words are the alliteration. Again here you can see enjambment in this line, third line and fourth line, enjambment. From 9th stanza to 13th stanza, we'll be talking about the literary devices used. Here you can see in the first line, took, tiny, T is being repeated. So this is the alliteration. Again, rolled, rolled. So this is alliteration as well as repetition. And here you can see thin as a wafer. This is the simile, because the cake, the dough she rolls and she bakes, and that is thin like a wafer. So here it is being compared using the word as. So thin as a wafer, this is the simile. Here you can see S sound is repeated. So this is the alliteration. Again here these are the alliterations used. Now let's see the poetic devices that are used in the last 4 stanzas. You can see in the first line, build as the birds do. Here ba, ba sounds are repeated. So this is alliteration. Again in the third line you can see ba, 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 alliteration. The last line you can see ba is being repeated. So this is the alliteration. Now let's go to the first line. You shall build as the birds do. So here the woman is being compared to the birds using the word as. So this is simile. In the same way, here you can see black as a coal. The color black is compared with coal using the word as. So this is simile. Now let's go to the third line where the word boring is being repeated. So these are the repetitions that are used in the last 4 stanzas. Now throughout the poem, if you see, the rhyme scheme used is AB, CB. Now just see the first stanza. The word do doesn't rhyme with any of the words. So we shall give this as A. The second word food rhymes with wood. So we shall give this as B. And the word boring, we shall mark it as C. So throughout the poem, it is A, B, C, B. You can check out the rhyme scheme for the other stanzas also. Dear audience, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and have learned how to analyze a poem. Please do subscribe my channel, give a thumbs up, share with your friends, and comment in the box below. Thank you for watching.